2319! We have a 2319!
Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am trying a new art form. Last week I used kintsugi on a mask that I made. It was about overthinking. If you've not seen that video, you should definitely go back and watch it. But as I was trying to type out kintsugi, I misspelt it and Google thought I was trying to spell Kinusaiga. Kinusaiga, that word. So I kind of dove down a rabbit hole and was getting into possibly trying this out as well. So today that's what I'm going to do. I don't really have a game plan as to what I'm going to build or what my inspiration for this quilted no-sew push into foam stuff is going to be. I've never done this before, so you're going to learn with me. So without further ado, let's get into Kinusaiga, or try. Let's get to building. There's something beautiful about the things in life that happen completely by accident. And I think this project might be the best example of that I've ever made. This started because I wanted to try something inspired by kintsugi, except I misspelled the word. That mistake led me to Kinusaiga, a Japanese art form that turns scraps of fabric into pictures and patterns. Kinusaiga became popular in Japan as a way to create beautiful artwork from old kimono fabric using pieces that might otherwise have been discarded. I love that idea, taking little scraps that seem like they don't have much value on their own and turning them into something beautiful when they're brought together. And honestly, that feels a lot like life. We don't get a perfect cut piece of fabric handed to us. We get scraps, some beautiful, some ugly, some we don't understand at all, and somehow we're expected to make something from them. I started with a piece of XPS foam and some double-sided adhesive tape. I drew a rooster from Moana onto it, stepped back, and immediately decided I didn't like it, so I wiped it off. Then, on a completely random Google search, I found Boo from Monsters Inc. and thought, yeah, let's make that. There wasn't a plan, there wasn't some grand artistic vision, it was just one random decision after another. And maybe that's how life works more often than we realize. We think we're supposed to know exactly what we're doing, we're supposed to have a plan, we're supposed to know where the road is taking us, but sometimes the picture we plan just doesn't look right. Sometimes we have to erase it, and sometimes what comes next is better than what the original was imagined. I cut along the lines with a hobby knife and then came to the part that makes Kinusaiga so interesting. I peeled back one little section at a time and started pushing scraps of fabric into the cuts with a vinyl weeding tool. There's no real pattern to the fabric, I just grabbed different colors and textures and started putting them together. Piece by piece, section by section, Boo started appearing. And I think there's something comforting about that, because life can feel exactly the same way. We don't get to see the finished picture. We just get the little piece that's in front of us. We make the best choices we can with what we have, and then we move on to the next piece. Sometimes we have no idea why something is happening while we're living through it. We don't understand what a particular moment is going to mean to us, but years later, we look back and realize those moments were part of the picture all along. That's true of people we meet too. Some people enter our lives for just a few minutes. Some stay for years. Some arrive completely unexpected and somehow become family. A random conversation can become a friendship. A chance meeting can become a love story. Someone we almost didn't talk to can become someone we can't imagine our lives without. We rarely know which people will become important when we first meet them. We just have to let them become part of the quilt. For the background, I wanted to add a pattern to my patterns, so I drew a checkerboard with a ruler and started alternating different shades of blue. This was my first attempt at Kinusaiga, and honestly, the piece was only supposed to be a warm-up for a much larger and more traditional project. Maybe something like a big koi motif. Something planned, something intentional, but somewhere along the way, the warm-up became the project. And that happens in life also. Sometimes the thing we thought we just practice becomes the thing we remember. Sometimes the detour becomes the destination. We spend so much time worrying about whether we're on the right path that we forgot something important. There isn't always one right path. Sometimes getting lost is the path. Think about the places you discovered because you took a wrong turn. The restaurant you never would have found. The little town you passed through. The sunset you stopped to watch because you weren't where you thought you were supposed to be. Some of our favorite memories are born from moments that were not supposed to happen. Getting lost can be frustrating in the moment, but sometimes the randomness of where we end up gives us experience we wouldn't trade for anything. Maybe that's why we remember the detours so fondly. They weren't part of the plan, they were ours. As I got further along, I noticed some areas of Boo weren't standing out from the background enough, so I had another random idea. I took copper wire and pushed it around her outline to make her pop. I'm not sure if it completely solved the contrast problem, but I loved what it did to the piece. And suddenly I started to think about how interesting it might be to combine fabric and metal in a future build. Another idea born from something that wasn't supposed to be there. And that got me thinking about how many things in our lives begin that way. A random thought, a strange coincidence, a person you weren't expected to meet, a wrong turn, a mistake, something that at the time seems completely insignificant. We don't always recognize those moments as important because we're waiting for the big moments. But maybe the big moments aren't as big as we think. Maybe they're built out of tiny, ordinary pieces we barely notice. The person who sits beside you on your first day somewhere new. The coworker you randomly start talking to. The stranger who says something you needed to hear. The person you almost didn't invite. The friend who wasn't supposed to become your best friend. Life has a strange way of placing people in our path without telling us why. And sometimes the most important people in our lives start as complete strangers who just happen to cross our paths at the right moment. And then I had another random thought. What if I framed Boo? So I started building the door frame for Monsters Inc., and naturally that turned into I need to build the floor, then the brackets holding the door, and the yellow canister that collects the screams. One random idea led to another until suddenly this little portrait needed an entire world built around it. And once again, I found myself doing the same thing. Layering foam, adding adhesive, drawing details, scoring lines, pushing fabric into place. I wasn't following some master plan anymore, I was just responding to whatever the project needed next. And maybe that's something we forget to do in our lives. We spend so much time trying to control the outcome that we forget to simply respond to what's in front of us. We want the map before we're willing to take the journey. We want to know how the story ends before we're willing to turn the page. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes you just have to take the next piece. You don't need to know what the entire quilt will look like. You just need to decide where the pieces belong.
then I thought, if I'm building Boo's door frame, I might as well build Boo's actual bedroom door too. So now this little Kinusaiga portrait had a moving part, which meant, of course, I had created an entirely new problem for myself. I covered the door in fabric, only to realize later, foreshadowing, that the back edge would not have enough clearance for it to actually open. But at this point, I was already learning something important about the project. Problems didn't mean I had ruined it. They just meant I had another piece to figure out. And that's life. We tend to think the unexpected things are interruptions. We think we're finally getting somewhere and something comes along and knocks the whole plan aside. But what if those moments aren't interruptions? What if it's just another piece of the quilt? We don't get to choose every patch. We don't get to choose every color. We don't get to decide which pieces will be beautiful and which ones are going to hurt. But every one of them becomes part of the picture. So I started assembling everything, and this was where the project became something I honestly didn't expect. Kinusaiga is traditionally a flat art form, but I was building mine into a three-dimensional structure. I know that I'm probably not the first person to ever try this, but it felt unique to me. Maybe that's another lesson in randomness. You don't always have to know whether someone else has done something before. Sometimes you just have to follow the idea until you find out where it leads. I hot glued the panels together, and slowly, almost unexpectedly, the structure began to take shape. And as I watched it come together, I started thinking about how much our lives are built like this. 1,000 little choices, 1,000 little accidents, people who appeared at exactly the right time, places we never intended to visit, failures that changed our direction, moments we didn't appreciate till much later. None of them seem like much when they're happening, but eventually you step back and realize they've created something that could only belong to you. Your life is a quilt no one else could make. Then came another problem. That door issue I talked about earlier, we're going to try and fix this. The door needed reinforcement, so I cut up pieces of an open pin and used them to strengthen the hinge. I pushed metal wire into the door, tested it, and immediately realized I needed to modify the foam in the back corner for clearance. So I pulled the fabric back, cut away the foam, added fresh adhesive, and carefully pushed the fabric back into place. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't planned, but it worked. And that's something I wish we could remember more often when life doesn't go according to plan. We think a mistake means that we're going backward. We think having to change directions means we failed. But sometimes fixing the mistake is what makes the final thing stronger. Sometimes the scar becomes part of the design. Sometimes the thing we thought ruined the picture becomes the reason the picture has character. We aren't creating a perfect life. We're creating a meaningful one, and there is a difference. And finally, I added the little grommet and the front of a Chicago screw to make a tiny doorknob. One more random collection of materials, ideas, mistakes, and adjustments, and somehow they became this. And the funny thing is, none of this was supposed to happen. I didn't plan to discover Kinusaiga. I didn't plan to erase a rooster and draw Boo. I didn't plan the copper, the door frame, the door, or any of the problems that came along the way. But if I had followed the original plan, none of this one would exist. And maybe that's the beauty of randomness. Life is full of scraps. People we randomly meet, places we get lost and somehow remember forever. Mistakes that change our direction. Moments that seem insignificant until years later when we realize how much they mattered. All those random patches become the quilts of our life. Some are bright, some are dark, some are beautiful, some are painful, but together they create something unique. A life that belongs only to us. I've heard it said that the meaning of life is to give life meaning. Maybe that's what we're doing with all these random pieces, taking whatever life hands us and deciding what it means to us. So maybe we don't need to control every part of the picture, maybe we just need to keep making the next piece. Because a wrong turn might become a cherished memory, a stranger might become family, a mistake might become an opportunity, and something you never intended to make might become something you wouldn't trade for anything. Sometimes the most beautiful things in our life aren't the things we carefully planned. They're the things we never saw coming. And when you finally step back and look at the whole thing, you realize those random scraps weren't just pieces of your life. They were the pieces that made your life yours.
And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty cool. It is by no means a replica of the actual doors in Monsters, Inc. or a perfect example of what it should look like. Like I said, this was my deep dive into it, and I thought I'd try and do something different than what I'd seen online, which is just people doing little painting, basically, things using this quilt method. And I thought I could try and make it three-dimensional. So if you've got some ideas of things that we could do with this, I've got a ridiculous amount of fabric now and probably need to put some of it to use. I still got a lot of this XPS foam also. Maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to try something new, make something cute, and bring back some nostalgia from your childhood or teenage years, or maybe you were an adult. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some...
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. Guess I need to go find a spot to set this up at. Peace out.
If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and you want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.